Dzień dobry, witam w kolejnym odcinku DigiTalks. Dziś będziemy prowadzić go po angielsku. My today's guest is Professor Victor Meyer-Schonberger, and I'll have pleasure to interview Victor about his new book. I have it here. In Polish it's Myślenie kontekstowe, Największa przewaga ludzi nad sztuczną inteligencją. And the English title is Framers, Human Advantage in an Age of Technology and Turmoil. Welcome, Victor. It's such a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yes, Victor is a professor of internet governance and regulation at Oxford. In his work, he focuses on the role of information in a networked economy. As I read on the internet, he has published 11 books, including one of my favorites, which is international bestseller, Big Data, the book that was translated into more than 20 languages. Victor also has written over 100 articles and book chapters, and he is also a member of Germany's Digital Council, and he was advising Angela Merkel and her cabinet. So very, very impressive. Victor, I would like to start with the small quote that was written about the book by Forbes, because I really, really liked it. And it's like opens the interesting discussion. Framers authors have a more ambitious project than Kahneman and Harari. They don't want to just point out how powerfully we are influenced by our perspective and prejudices, our frames. They want to show us that these frames are tools and that we can optimize their use. So in your book, you write that while computers become better at some of cognitive tasks, framing becomes a critical function. And what is promising, only humans can do it. So as far as I know, this book is the first guide to mastering this human ability. So my first question to you, Victor, is what is framing?
Well, thank you very much. Framing is really a cognitive superpower that we possess. We humans, when we think about something, when we think about the world and have to make a decision, we always think in mental models. These are representations of reality in our mind. And as we think about what we could decide, whether we do this or whether we do that, we are sort of playing around in our mental model and imagine what would happen if we do this, what would happen if we do that. We are always in a mental model, but we can switch from one mental model to another. So we can be in a mental model that the world is round, or in a mental model that the world is flat. We can switch between those two. The one thing that we cannot do is to be outside of a mental model. We always need a mental model in our mind. Mm-hmm. So don't believe ever in this stupid slogan, think outside the box, because we can't.
I will be talking about it later. Yes.
You're always in a box. Mm-hmm. But as you said so rightly, Kahneman and Tversky and the behavioral economists have pointed out that those mental models sometimes mean that we make bad decisions. We pick the wrong of two options. And they're right. That's a problem. And it's a problem that we cannot solve easily. But rather than focusing on our disability of picking the wrong of two options, mm-hmm. we are better off generating a third, a fourth, a fifth option that is far better than the two conventional options already on the table when we have to make a decision. And that is the power, the real power of framing.
So how can we practice this? Is it like very difficult? Is it possible to learn it and can everyone do it?
So interestingly enough, when we look at great innovators from Steve Jobs to Elon Musk, when we look at great artists from Martha Graham, the modern dance specialist, to Pablo Picasso, when we look at sports people, they all are really good framers when they are very successful. But importantly, there is nothing that they have that we don't have. We all are good framers if we want to be. And we train it from the very early days of our lives. Children start doing it when they're really young. All this pretend play, pretend to play doctor, pretend to play shop. We thought for a long time that this was honing social skills. But more recent research has shown that what we're actually doing as children is we are honing our mental models, our framing skills. We are thinking in our mind, what if I pretend to be a doctor? What would the other side do? And what if happens if I do then this, and so forth? So we're in pretend play, and that is honing our framing skills. The problem is we forget about this when we grow older. And so Alison Gopnik, one of the superstars of research, cognitive research in this field, she said that the children are the research and development department of humanity, when we older people tend to be more like marketing and sales.
Yeah, so you mean like it's good to practice with children and maybe to have like some kind of play with them, and it's not only they're pretending that they are someone else, so we should also do it.
Exactly. And if we don't have children around to do it, there are other ways to do it very easily. Take a book, read a novel, listen to music, Chopin, for example, and just let your mind wander in the mental model that this brings up. As we do this, we ask ourselves, what if we're reading a crime book, a detective story, we ask ourselves, what if she is the murderer? What if he is the murderer? What if this is a piece of evidence? All this what if playing around in our mind is honing our framing skills. And we do it when we read a book. We do it when we go to the theater. We also do it when we play a good video game.
So yeah, that's a great advice, because I think we also have to switch from the model that we're learning only at schools. And now when we're adults, we're only practicing, stuff at work. So the lifelong learning experiment is really a good idea. Also while practicing framing.
Indeed, and that's actually completely strange. Always has been strange to me that we are going to the gym and doing physical practice. But the most important muscle that we have in our body is the cognitive muscle, the muscle in our mind. And we're not practicing it. We think that all the practice is done once we are out of school or out of university. That strikes me as odd. And so what we need to do is, much as we practice, by cycling or hiking or going to the gym, we also need to practice our cognitive capabilities.
So how often should we work on it?
We can do it every day. In fact, when we read a book, or when we just think about for ourselves as we approach a problem or make a decision, what is the mental model? What's the frame that I am in? And become reflective about that. And then think about the limitations of that frame. And interestingly enough, most of the frames that we have in our mind that we use are far more flexible and generate better decision options if we push it a little bit. And we can do so quite successfully. Let me give you one example. We all are in awe of SpaceX, the company that has the rockets go to space and then land back and can be reused. Now, reusing the rocket has been an idea since the 1960s. NASA has studied it, but they kind of were stuck in thinking that it was impossible. And perhaps in the 1960s it was, because computers weren't good enough and sensors weren't good enough. But in the 21st century, this has changed. And so we should look at the mental model again. And when we push the mental model, as SpaceX did, we discover that there are more decision options than just have the rocket come back on a parachute or land back like a space shuttle. It could actually land upright, and SpaceX was right to try it. Our mental models are able to generate better decision options far more than we think.
So that's an excellent example. So, and what is very promising, as far as I know, only humans can do it. So it's impossible for technology, right?
It is. Machines are really good in uncovering patterns in the data, and that's wonderful. But when the machine makes a prediction, the machine basically says what happened yesterday is going to happen tomorrow. And that works beautifully if the past and the future are similar, if the future is like the past. Or the machine says apples are like oranges. And so if I have a problem with oranges, I can look at how to solve it by looking at how apples solved that problem. So all these predictions are based on the past or the present and are projecting into the future. That works if the world doesn't change. It works beautifully. Unfortunately, the world changes. And we are now facing very significant and unheard of challenges. Think about the terrible war in the middle of Europe. Think about the pandemic that we just came out of. Think about climate change and environmental degradation. Think about populism in our democracies. Think about the change in our businesses from an industrial economy to an information and data-based economy. All this requires new solutions, and therefore computers are really bad because they give us the solutions from yesterday, not the solutions we need for tomorrow.
Also, that's a great news, because there is a lot of fear in humans that technology will replace us, at least at work. So we have a lot of discussion here in Poland and also in Europe about that. This kind of thinking is really stupid, because we have different abilities. So as I see the future is that there will be place for humanity and for technology going hand in hand. But this also requires from us people to develop. It's not that we can just like sit and wait, the future will come and we solve all the problems.
Indeed. We need to focus on what we can do really well. What makes us special, what gives us the seat on the table of evolution. And that is not calculating faster than the computer. The computer is faster in that. That's not lifting heavier items than the machine does. The machine is better on that. What we need to focus on is what the machine cannot do, and that is to dream, to imagine, but not just a crazy dream or a crazy imagination, but an imagination that is targeted towards solving a problem. Just think about you're in Warsaw and you're late for a meeting, and you're in a public bus or a tram, and you think yourself, oh, should I get out of the bus and take a taxi instead? Might that speed it up or might that slow it down? What you're doing is you're making what-if questions. You're asking in your mind alternative realities. Would that change if I do this or do that? And these what-if questions help us imagine a reality that doesn't exist. But it's not a crazy reality where we beam each other to destinations. It's a very constrained, limited reality that helps us make decisions in the here and now.
Yes. So I'd like to focus a bit on what you said, that thinking out of the box is a stupid idea. I'd like to focus on it because creativity is very important competence of the future, and we talk a lot about it. It even grew. It was like among the most important competencies. It was like number 10 maybe a few years ago. Now it's number 2 or 3. So it's really important, and I think, and it's very normal that we don't teach it properly, because we always think, okay, so we'll start thinking out of the box. Yeah, and especially in big organizations, everyone organizes out of the box meetings or brainstorming meetings on Friday afternoons, and it doesn't work. So can you tell us a bit about what works and how to, and why out of the box thinking is not a good idea, and what we can have instead?
Well, we always think in mental models, as I said earlier on. And so telling people to think outside of a mental model is not only impossible, it also confuses them. We now have research that shows when people try to think outside the box, for example, on Friday afternoon meetings, the solutions that they come up with are inferior, are worse than any other solutions when they think inside boxes. Thinking outside the box is a really, really bad idea. The architect, the very famous architect, Frank Gehry, was once asked by a couple to design a house with no constraints, no limitations. And he said this was the most difficult and the most unrewarding work that he had ever to do, because he said, I am really good when I have constraints, when I have limitations. And then these limitations force me to think about what could we do with them? How could we work around them? Constraints are the fuel of our imagination. Take the constraints away, take the box away,
Yes.
and we are lost. We humans are always in a world of constraints, of limitations. That's what we are used to. So far better than saying there's no constraints is to be careful and say, here are the constraints. Let's go through them. And let's say, is this still a constraint, a hard constraint, or has it changed? Remember SpaceX? There, the constraint changed. The computers became more powerful. Or think about music. We used to buy music on stupid CDs that had one good song and 9 bad songs on it. Why? Why was that collection on it? Why couldn't we just buy one song? Well, because 50 minutes of music fitted on a CD, and so it needed to be filled. But when we started downloading music, Steve Jobs from Apple said, it doesn't make any sense anymore to download a whole CD with 10 songs. Why don't people just buy the individual song that they want? And that was the birth of the iTunes Music Store, because he looked at a constraint, 50 minutes of music with the CD, and said, that doesn't exist anymore in digital. And so let's go by song. And then a couple of years later, lo and behold, a Swedish company, Spotify, came on stage, and they looked at it and they said, we could start a new iTunes Music Store with different colors and so forth, but maybe people don't need to own music. Maybe people just want to experience music, to listen to it. So why don't we just give them the experience without actually giving them or selling them the ownership? And that became streaming music, and the rest is history. It's all about the constraints and how we change the constraints that enable new decisions, new innovations, and new futures.
Yes, that's especially interesting for me because I'm currently reading the biography of Keith Richards from Rolling Stones, and he was talking about his youth when it was so difficult to buy any music because it was on cassettes, all of this, and vinyl. So that's really kind of a difference, a huge difference that we have today. As I told you, I really liked reading your book, because it's full of examples, and it's you read it more like it's not like a book with full of advices and like this. It's very easy to read because there is so many examples of contextual thinking. So there are also interesting examples about COVID, how reframing helps here, and also about the Me Too hashtag, how it reframed the perception of sexual assault. Can you share with us an example with maybe you have your favorite from the book, or the one you think it's most interesting?
I've lots of favorites. Me Too is a very interesting one, and a very powerful one. We have long heard about, and society has fretted over, very aggressive behavior of males vis-a-vis females, and misogynist behavior. But it was always about the perpetrators. The perpetrators came into the news and so forth, and the victims were speechless. And because they were speechless, because they didn't have a voice, they were often also powerless. And what really changed was when Alyssa Milano started to popularize the hashtag Me Too on Twitter, and when it took off, and it empowered women all around the world to say, it happened to me too. So suddenly that misogynist, aggressive behavior it became a topic of discussion, and the voiceless women got a voice. And that was crucial for society to tackle this very important problem. It gave a voice to the voiceless, and it shifted the balance between the perpetrators and the victims. It essentially reframed the problem. And reframing, or sort of looking at it from a different frame through a different model, is oftentimes the path towards a solution or towards a new innovation. Moving from the moral heights of Me Too down to sort of the businesses, if I may. It's what IKEA did in the 1950s. We used to inherit furniture. It used to be heavy and dark, and we didn't particularly like it. And then Ingmar Kamprad in Sweden said, maybe furniture can be fashionable. Maybe furniture can be cheap, and every generation can buy its own furniture. Perhaps even every 10 years or so, we can reinvent ourselves. Furniture became not just something that existed from one generation to the next, but that was a statement of how we wanted to live, and what kind of preferences and likes we had. Wherever we look, whether it's innovation in the business sense, or whether it's great new ideas and decisions being made in society or on an individual level, framing is at the root of it.
Yes, these are I think extremely interesting examples of really like changing how the life looks like in this certain area. So this is a very powerful tool, I have to say. My last question is about kids, because a lot of people who are watching Digitalks or listening to it have kids, and really think a lot about how to help them to become an adult person in the future that we don't know how it's going to look like, and the jobs that don't exist yet. So Victor, what's your advice? How to help kids in this kind of thinking, to practice to perfectionize it, and what can we do?
Well, I have a quick answer and a bigger answer. The quick answer, of course, is when you want to help your children, read to them aloud, for example, because as you read to them, they have to imagine the world that you're reading about. And that is already sort of honing the framing skills, because we are asking ourselves, what if this looks like this? What if this happens? It's just helping them practicing, working their mental models. So reading aloud is a real simple, straightforward intervention that we all can do, from the age of 2 to the age of 12, maybe, or 13. The bigger issue, of course, is that we need to change education, change conventional education from 6 to 18, but also lifelong learning. All these needs to change, not to emphasize downloading of knowledge and information like we have been doing for hundreds of years, like learning poems by heart or so forth. That's all wonderful. But at the end of the day, what the next generation unfortunately needs to do is to solve a lot of problems, a lot of really huge problems, because my generation left them with a lot of problems. And so they need to solve them. And that doesn't require downloaded information because there is no solution yet available. It requires problem solving capacity. And that requires basically a broad repertoire of frames of mental models, and building up that repertoire, and also instilling in our kids and instilling in ourselves the desire, the hunger, the appetite to learn more, to see the world through different lenses, is really crucial for the capability of humanity to survive the next 100 years. So that's what we have to do.
Oh, yes, I fully agree with you. I have 12-year-old daughter, and I think a lot about it. And you mentioned Elon Musk. The interesting example is with the school he created for his kids. So the children are focusing there on learning how to solve difficult problems that will appear in the future. A lot of them requires a lot of empathy, which we also don't train yet. And as I look at the world today, when that we have, as you said, we have climate problems, we have COVID, another pandemic may be coming in a few years.
Surely is going to come. We just don't know when.
Yes, and what kind of pandemic is going to be. So we have to change the way we think, and we have to practice making decision in the very, very different circumstances and with the challenges that we do not have now.
And we need to do them together. We need to work in teams, because diverse teams with people with different views, that coming together and discussing and brainstorming solutions will not be easy and frictionless and costless, but heads will bang against each other. But there's a much better chance in diverse teams to produce a good solution than if you just think alone about it. And Elon Musk's school is emphasizing it, the synthesis school, as it is called. And I have a 12-year-old son who has been enrolled in synthesis for over a year now, and really learns how to work in teams, how to listen, how to have his own voice, and how to add to the repertoire of mental models. I wish that conventional schools would take a page from that idea. And of course, in lifelong learning, we need to do that as well. It's most crucial for our future.
Wow. And I think it's a great ending of our discussion. So my wonderful guest of today's podcast was Victor Meyer-Schonberger, professor at Oxford. And we both highly recommend to read this book, this amazing book, which is really, really worth reading for everyone who is at least a bit interested in future technology, what's coming, how to, help your children grow. In Polish, the title is Myślenie kontekstowe, and I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for the discussion, Victor.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I hope we'll have you one day in Poland to discuss further this very interesting topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.